In this nugget, of the many things that I am grateful for is food. And I'm also grateful when people do me little favors. For example, one of my kids will maybe bring a snack or bring a meal to me while I'm working on a project, and I'm really, really grateful for them doing that for me. Well, in a NetScaler environment, a server that's running SSL or supporting SSL normally has to do all of that encryption and decryption. However, if we use this technique called SSL offload, we can have the SSL functionality be done on the NetScaler, courtesy of the virtual server on that NetScaler. So the initial hello from the client, the sending of the certificate, the negotiating of the SSL session, and the extra lifting that's done would be supporting SSL, but the backend servers could be HTTP. So that way we have the benefits of the authentication and the confidentiality through encryption that SSL and TLS bring to us between our customers and the NetScaler. And that will indeed free up some cycles on these servers because they no longer have to process the encryption and decryption of every single packet. To implement the SSL offload, we're going to presume we have a couple things in place. Number one, that we have a digital certificate on the NetScaler that's been signed by a certificate authority. And with that certificate in place, what we're going to do is we are going to create a new virtual server that's supporting SSL and port 443, which is the default port for SSL/TLS. And then secondly, we're going to associate that CA signed certificate with that virtual server that we just created. And then step number 3, we're going to bind the virtual server to one or more service objects. In our topology, since we already have service objects in place, HTTP service objects in place for servers 1, 2, and 3, we can just have the new virtual server be bound to those existing service objects. So we'll be doing SSL on the front end between the NetScaler and the client. And then on the back end, the NetScaler will be communicating and passing my lab CA, a Microsoft server running certificate services. Next, we'll create a new virtual server. So that's under traffic management, load balancing, virtual servers, and we'll click on add. And let's call it lbservercolors.acme.com. And that's just the name so we can recognize it in the configuration on the NetScaler. More by clicking add binding, click to select, we'll click on blue, click OK, click bind, and now we have all 3 of those services bound to this virtual server. Also, as a point of interest, the default weight for each of these is a 1. The protocol between the NetScaler and these servers is going to be using HTTP, and these The refresh, and let's think what could be the possible problem here. And it just occurred to me what that problem is. We have a beautiful certificate. We have a beautiful SSL virtual server, but we haven't told the virtual server to use the certificate. We haven't bound those together yet. So to do that, let's go ahead and select the virtual server. We'll click on Edit. And over here on the right, it. And if we have things over here on the left that we don't want to see, we can go ahead and click on the X, which will put them back over on the right. And what I want to do is I want to go ahead and change the method. So we'll click on the plus symbol next to method, and we'll change the load balancing method to round robin. And click on OK, and then click on Done. The other thing I'd like to do is set up DNS so that when somebody tries to go let's do an NS lookup for colors.acme.com, and it reports back 23124, which is fantastic. We could have also attempted a ping to that IP address, and that would also help us verify whether or not it got resolved correctly from the name to the IP address. So let's close that command prompt, and let's launch Google Chrome. Now, by default, Google Chrome I have set up to launch us in incognito mode, and it goes by default to the home page of 23.1.2.3. So that's old news. That's our original virtual server. And what we want to do is we want to go to the new virtual server at HTTPS, and we want to go to 4. And my browser is reporting back that it has a problem with the certificate. Now, what could possibly be the problem with this certificate? And it could very likely having an issue with this certificate. The second reason, and very likely in a lab environment, that my computer would be having problems with the certificate is that Bob's computer and Bob's browser doesn't trust my Microsoft CA that issued the digital certificate. So if we had used a PKI certificate authority that my browser already trusted, Bob's browser in this case, we won't have the issue of trust regarding the actually click on copy and click on next, and this will export that certificate, the root certificate that we're having an issue with, to our computer and then import it as a trusted CA. That is one option. So here we click on next. I'll give it a file name. I'm going to browse to a location so I know where I'm saving this file. So I'm going to place it in my downloads folder as the file name root.cer. Click on next, and then click on finish. So I just exported that certificate. And then what I could do in my browser is I could go ahead and go to settings, and it might be a little bit different based on the version and flavor of browser you're using. But I'm going to search for certificate. And here in Chrome, I'm going to click on the button that says Manage Certificates. Then I can select Trusted Root Certificate Authorities, click on Import, and I could then click on Next, browse for that same file, click on Open, click on Next, and then it would place that on my computer in the Trusted Root Certificate Authority store. So I'm going to click on Next and Finish. And it says the import was successful. So now as we go down this list, I've got this certificate authority for NUGLab AD RDS-CA, which is the certificate authority that issued the certificate in the assuming we're doing round-robin load balancing, which indeed we are. In this nugget, we've discussed and demonstrated how we can do SSL offload by creating a new SSL virtual server on the NetScaler, then binding that virtual server to the backend services, and then finally telling that virtual server to use the CA signed certificate. I appreciate you joining me for this nugget. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.